If you stepped away from your business tomorrow, like really stepped away, would it still run? I mean, not for a week, not for a quarter, but for good. I'm Kim Bohr, CEO of Spark Effect and host of Courage to Advance. That's the question my guest today has spent his career helping leaders answer honestly. This episode comes from Ground Truth, the LinkedIn Live series I host monthly with Ted Wolfe, who is doing double duty today as my guest. Ted is the co-founder of Guidewise.ai, the author of the new book, The Intelligent Business Equation, available on Amazon, and someone who has built and sold a $650 million business before turning his attention to helping other founders do the same. I hope you enjoy our conversation as it had a lot to offer. So I want to talk about what did you draw on to bring that book to life? Because it was so much of your own experiences. And so given, we had our conversation last month where you interviewed me about my CEO role at Spark Effect, I've really been thinking about how much your book is meeting this really complex moment in business that we're all facing. And so I'm really curious, what were you seeing that, whether it was in your own work or the clients you worked with and leaders you advised, that made you decide this was the right book that needed to be written now? And please share more about the title and kind of the concept for everybody.
Okay. So the title of the book is The Intelligent Business Equation. And the reason why it's called The Intelligent Business is because we're in the age of AI, and intelligent businesses are going to be pretty normal in the near term. And not everybody understands how that intelligent business is derived. So it's an equation. There's 5 reconciliations that I recommend an organization go through every month, every quarter, at appropriate times. And the 5 reconciliations, I'll draw an analogy to every month end, you close the books. So I call these 5 closes. There are 5 things that you learn from each month or each quarter. You, I'm going to say, regenerate them into what you're going to be doing in the next phase or the next 90-day goals that you have. And if you follow this process, you will be setting your business up for, number one, it'll be transferable. And what a lot of businesses don't know at this point in time, and I should say there's a lot of them because there's about 12 million mid-market businesses that should be up for some type of a merger and acquisition activity in the next 10 years, simply because the aging of the entrepreneurs between 50 and 60 years old. And there's a multi-year effort in many respects that they have to undertake to prepare for the sale. So I saw the numbers and I saw how most organizations are totally unprepared in that way. Mm-hmm. And I thought this is the time for the book, because we have a confluence of technology being AI. We have a confluence of businesses that are aging and they need some type of a merger or acquisition effect that'll take place probably. And with the whole thing of people, because people are pretty scared right now. Is AI going to put me out of a job? We're hearing some of the worst things, and I understand that. I do think there's an awful lot of bright spots for people in general, but they're going to have to work and prepare themselves. So the book also is, how do you prepare for the age of AI? So I just thought all those 3 things coming together, the aging population of entrepreneurs, AI as a technology coming on board, and people saying, well, how do I acclimate to this transformation? Because it is significant. Mm-hmm. Now's the time to write the book and get it out there so people can start talking, planning. And I want to help as many of them as I can, because unfortunately, if you want to sell your business today, you have about a 30% chance on average. That means 70% of the businesses don't sell. That can be a very disheartening situation, but it could be a great, great learning experience to tell you, okay, here's what I need to do so that I can take advantage of the market. That's why now at this point in time, I found it to be really important.
Yeah, I noticed you dedicated the book to the silver tsunami, and that makes sense with what you've described about the aging population of owners today. One of the quotes that really stood out to me was, you said, most founders and senior leaders are 2 decisions away from building something transferable. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about what that means and what happens to, employees and communities when businesses aren't transferable and they end up just closing.
Yeah. Well, the bad news is they just close, and it's a fire sale or going out of business sale that we all know. But it's just a situation. If they're not prepared for AI, if they're not prepared for the people change and the transformation in the business, and they're not familiar with how they need to scale the business through strategy and business objectives, they're going to be in a real hard place. So the two decisions away. Number one, they can make the decision that I am going to make a business that is transferable. And what that means is if you have somebody that's interested in merging or acquiring, they're going to want to know that you're transferring ongoing cash flow and revenue and a business that is documented, that it will continue to run without a key person or key people, meaning it's systems driven. So you can make the decision to do that now. And the other decision, quite obviously, is a term that not everybody knows, but it is really a good term, and that is optionality. Optionality comes out of the finance area, and it really means I have financial options available to me. So what I want to be able to do is help people understand that you don't grow a business just to sell it. And that's what the common mindset might be. I'm going to build this business and someday somebody's going to want to buy it because it's going to be that good. Well, we all fall in love with our own inventions very easily. And that means our businesses. But it's not transferable because it's dependent on people. And if they leave, the business gets hurt. And that's translated as risk to a private equity person or a buyer in general. And the second thing is you don't have financial options that you can do. So the story of the book, in effect, is the story of an individual by the name of Dana running a business, and she thinks the normal thing is to sell. But she's learning by going through the sale process and the quality of earnings exercise, which can be pretty brutal in many respects. She doesn't have options ahead of her other than to sell or go out of business. But if you put in the structures, the systems that make your business having financial options, you can sell, you can refinance the business, you can build succession plans in the business because you have people to take over the business. You can go out and you can actually acquire other businesses. And then if you do hold it, you can compound the growth if you bring AI in and build an intelligent business. If you don't do that, you've got a fire sale option at the end. But if you do certain things and build optionality and transferability into your business, you have all these other choices that are available to you. And for an entrepreneur or leaders in business in particular, you've got an awful lot of freedom of choice then. I have options by doing one thing, and that is build optionality, which is the structures that makes you have financial options or gives those to you. And the second thing then is I can transfer it. I know I've done my homework and somebody can buy this and they're going to buy a good business because everything's transferable by way of contracts and assurability of people. And if the people leave, the systems are here, you're buying, and it still operates on its own.
So what you're really making the case in the approach of the book is that creating optionality is really happening through this age of AI.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's taking advantage of AI, but it's building specific systems. For instance, one system might be workflow and processes all documented. And do people actually follow them? And how do I know they're following them? Because if they are making side deals, arrangements, I'm going to give you an extreme example, but I've seen it in many places. Somebody says, I'm a go-to person, man or woman. They come to me, everyone, I just get something done. I can fix it. I can get things done. I put out fires. That's what I'm really good at. Well, after a while, you got to ask the question, why aren't you preventing the fires? Heroics are saying, I'm really good at putting out fires, and that's what makes me important. AI and one of the systems that gets you to optionality is you won't have fires like this anymore. Your people are going to be free to think about innovating so that I can prevent the fires in the system, which makes it better for everybody. Because when you have a fire, it takes over your whole psychology. You don't critically think. You don't have emotional intelligence unless you're really training on it. So all of a sudden, you're in a whirlwind and you can't gain that calm in a storm that you need so that you can put things in place so that you don't need to put out fires.
Yep. That makes a ton of sense. So your experience, for people who may not be as familiar, was you have started a company some years back that had $1,000, built it to a $650 million business that you then sold. I'm going to ask this question and break it up into kind of two parts. One is, at that time, AI was not a thing. So I'm curious what you learned in that process, some of those lessons learned that then informed you some of the work you're doing now. But then I also want to I'm going to hold off for a separate question specific to AI and some of the nuances there.
Okay. I was 26 years old. My brother and I started a business. We put $500 each into the business. Needless to say, it wasn't well capitalized. We didn't come from money, but we worked for IBM and we learned technology. And this was back in the 70s and 80s, in particular 80s. And what we did was we knocked on doors and we found out that finding good technical people you could put into a client is a very difficult thing to do. So long story short, we made a lot of mistakes, and I'm happy to talk about all the mistakes we made because those mistakes are what trained me prior to AI to put and build these 5 closes in the book. I learned how to run a business with EBITDA and the place for EBITDA where it works and the place where it can cause harm. I learned how to systematize so we could make decisions, and those decisions get tracked and logged. I learned how to basically, in those days, build the technology we needed to build in-house so we could expand quickly. And then I also learned overall how to communicate to people from their context, their viewpoint, and make decisions through their eyes, empathy, if you will. And then I learned how to build leaders in the organization. And we were very fortunate. We had 650 billable people across the United States. And then we had another 100 employees on top of that, probably, that were doing recruiting and sales. And then we ended up selling that to Iron Mountain Corporation, which is a publicly traded company. So when we did the sale to Iron Mountain, I went through the whole exit experience, and working with them and private equity, I learned an awful lot about how private equity works, and I learned what it takes to sell a business. And I love helping companies preparing for the sale, or we're also targeting private equity firms for their portfolio companies to go in and help them implement AI in their technology. Although it's a really nice story to tell and it sounds good, we earned every bit of growth. It wasn't just given to us. We had ups and downs. We had the 82 recession. We had a weekend where we lost 40% of our revenue because people walked out and one of our employees started a competing firm, and we had big decisions to make. But interestingly, after that happened on a Friday, 5 years later, we were one of Inc. 500's 500 fastest growing businesses, privately owned businesses in the United States. So we took our knocks, but we worked really hard, but we really thought things through. And that's the critical thinking aspect that you have to do if you're an entrepreneur. So that's how the book got framed. And they were the lessons that taught me, here's what it takes to run a good business. And here are the mistakes and the pitfalls you don't want to run into. And they framed those 5 closes in the book.
So then just kind of sticking with that timeline and in that moment, so much of that is different now, right? At the time, there was no, agentic AI in the mix. There was no concept of human AI intelligence. The version of transferable of that buyer would have evaluated is so fundamentally different than what organizations are facing now. So talk a little bit about how is it possible to build a transferable business right now without AI in the architecture? I mean, there are some businesses, I assume, that you can, but I think it sounds like your argument is that there's a place for this in almost everything at this stage.
Yes, you are correct. I do think there's a place for it. But how do you go about doing it? Okay, you sit back and you say, what is going to change in business over time and what isn't going to change? The fads come into what changes. So everybody thinks, oh, I got to get on that next wave and I got to make sure I got my timing right. And that all has its place in business. Don't get me wrong. But there are certain things in business that aren't going to change, and they're the fundamentals of building a transferable business. I'll give you an example. Do you have good accounting? Do you know how to frame goals in a business that are not 2 years out there? Because nobody can identify with a 2-year goal. But how do you break them down into milestones? And then how do you take that and how do you build it into a system that logs decisions and logs what people are doing? I'll give you an example. We tracked an awful lot of things. On every individual out there that was billing, we had a profit and loss statement on them. We had an income statement. We knew exactly what they were doing and who was contributing. But we wanted to grow fast, so we had to design a system that would encourage people, I'm going to say manager, the great middle of the organization, which is where it all happens. We had to motivate them to train and teach and mentor other people reporting to them so they could go on and become future managers, or we couldn't grow because we had nobody to manage the growth.
Yeah.
So we designed a system that would do that, and how we would take that and measure. Kim, if you work for us, how many people did you manage that ended up being future managers in the business? That was one of the most valuable things we could have done. But to us, we just wanted to grow. So it was common sense to us.
Yeah.
We thought it through. But then we said, how do we make it an intelligent business? And that's today's term. We didn't say then, but how can we make a business that is innovative and has a sense of urgency to grow and create new products and offerings in that whole software world or the world of technology? We designed some systems along those ways. Now, we didn't have anything like AI or anything at all, but we could still build those systems and put them in place. And the whole core thing it rests on is culture.
Yeah.
How do we build the right culture that incentivizes people, is based on honesty, it's based on respect for the individual, it's based on empathy so that we could all understand where each other's coming from and help each other grow and mentor each other internally. That's a really hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to do today. People are working from home. How do you get them all on the same culture and doing things? So, but culture is the bedrock. I mean, if you can get the culture, and I'm a big believer in defining core values. And I don't mean core values that you put in a picture frame and then put by the water cooler or you never look at again. I mean, use them every single day to define problems, solve problems, make decisions, evaluate circumstances, evaluate the strategy of the business and where's it going to unfold. All of those things you don't need AI for.
Right.
But you can have a smart company. Now, the opposite side, and here's the dichotomy, you can have a very smart company without AI. The difference is you're not going to compete in the future if you don't have AI because the returns are so significant. I've never seen anything like this. I've been in technology since I worked for IBM going back to the 80s. So the returns are phenomenal. And if you can't compete culturally, business processes and control and business objectives that you're tying your technology to, and you can't get people that are really out there for you and with you, and they're going to share in the returns, I don't know how you're going to put that company together that's going to succeed in the future and become that quote unquote, air quotes, intelligent business. It's going to be very difficult to do. Really challenging to do.
Knowing that transferability is this test, and perhaps there's people listening that are building organizations that don't necessarily have a plan for exiting at this stage, but they're really trying to figure out, well, where is AI fitting and how does this work? Like, what do you recommend? Where are you recommending they start? Because AI is moving so quickly. There's so much complexity, whether that's, self-driven or through just the various tools that are out there around, like, where do we start? Where do you tell people to start when they need to stay competitive?
There's a couple of things you're going to have to do today so you can be transferable, but you also have options, financial options and backing that you never have to make a decision out of necessity. You can put those in place, and that's not just a function of size. And the first thing you have to do, because we were small, we started out with 2 people and we ended up with 750 employees. So you can do all this stuff while you're small, and it's easier to do then. You can go in and get core values. paint a picture of the future that might be next 2-3 years or further down the road that you want to do some good planning, but have good accounting. You're going to need good accounting, and that's basically close one. So you're going to have to put my accounting and know my numbers and understand the numbers, but can't just be numbers driven. I have to understand the human, the high tech, high touch concept is if I have my numbers, I got to know what that translates into human behavior and triggers for behavior. So in the future, you're going to have to become part psychologist in many respects. Know thyself is where it all comes from. So you put that in place. And then what you're going to have to do is be able to say, do I have my legal contracts in place? Do I actually have assignable rights? Do I have IP that I need to protect? Do I have copyrights in place? Do I have them registered? Do I have trademarks in place? Do I have them registered? And then what's the value of all that? So from a business standpoint, and this is the one main area or component of what I call an ecosystem, you have to have all your business objectives in line, and you have to know where you're going. So you need to know, in PE terminology, what's my burn rate? What's my monthly costs on average? And that comes down to SG&A almost always. Then you need to be able to say, okay, am I developing liquidity in the business or aren't I? Am I developing equity, in effect, value in the business? A business is meant to create value. So there are certain drivers. There are drivers like, okay, do I have all my finances in place? What are my products and services like? What do they need addressed? I need to be able to go in there and say, how are my operations operating? How are they efficient and effective in producing what I need in every single area? Ultimately, underneath all that is the culture. So you need to be able to make sure you got your culture in place. And that comes back to the core values and beliefs, core beliefs of the organization. Today, I know a lot more about this that I didn't know about years and years ago when I started the business, but you have to be able to align the company purpose with the employee's purpose. You have to align the core values and beliefs of the company with the core values and beliefs of the individual. You have to be able to create meaning of the events in your business. And you do that through rituals and explanations and a lot of clarity and everything in what you communicate with them in mind, because they have to win before you win. Yeah. I learned that in business. They have to win, or if they don't win, you're never going to win. All of that put in place, I don't need AI for it, but I need to make sure my systems are in place. And today they call that governance. What are the rules that the business runs by? How do I deliver and sell product A? How do I onboard a client for product A? How do I create an ongoing good experience for them? And in turn, hopefully make a profit on all of that. Mm-hmm. So I need the numbers, I need the objectives, I need the whole business thing. And I need to know how to scale the business, number one. Then I need to know what technology I'm going to use. Today, that would be AI. And then I need number three in that ecosystem is the people. Will the people use the technology, and will they adapt to the change that all of this is creating? And we're all living in a time of fierce change in both speed and scope. So how do I put all that together? And really, you can do all that without AI, but AI is the big force multiplier.
Yep.
It is what just puts everything on steroids. So I would just say to you very quickly, and everybody listening, this isn't a situation where you've got years to let this work out like you would bringing up or using the Word document or Outlook and all of those things. This is moving fast. So just think that there's somebody over your shoulder watching, or you need to watch, who might be 25, 30-year-old new people who understand technology, and they're going to put this entire thing together using agents in the agentic workforce. And you're not going to be able to compete with it because you can't catch up. And they're going to run circles. Now, if you got a good human element in the culture, you can compete, but not at the speed they're going to be moving. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to bring AI in some capacity, and it's got to be a systems approach. And if you have your business processes and your numbers, availability of data the way it needs to be, then you can apply an agentic workforce to the business or agents. And that's a whole other conversation, and orchestration and how you manage them and how you build what we call that flywheel of intelligence in a business today. And that is an individual human builds an agent. The agent learns from the human. The agent does its work if it's built properly. and it will teach the human how to get smarter and more intelligent. And it's an ongoing process. Multiply that by the number of people in your business. And in effect, the competency is constantly increasing all the time then, because the flywheel of learning and implementing that learning just makes it so much easier to grow a business. And I know everybody thinks, oh, it's terrible, it's going to take jobs. Well, it's going to hit your identity. The firefighter arsonist that I talked about earlier that puts out fires and is real good at it. Well, AI is going to take away a lot of it. So they'll say, well, what's my value to the business? Well, your value is prevent the fire and do it through critical thinking and emotional intelligence, because there's the two skills you got to have in the future. And everything will work out. It's going to work out. It can be a train wreck, but it doesn't have to be. If we entrepreneurs can come together and build really good businesses, because that's going to be the saving soul, I think, of the future. And that's what's going to guide technology.
One of the quotes that I really appreciate from your book that aligns very well what you're saying now, and it aligns with our state of organizational trust research, is that resistance is rarely irrational, it is protective. And I think we're seeing that so much now because of fear. For those listening, as we start to wrap up, are there, a couple of nuggets that you would say, hey, if you're in the midst of all this now, if maybe you haven't done things in the specific order you're suggesting, where might they start to dig in and ground, specifically around the people that, the people side, because as we've agreed, that's so critical to bringing the AI side along as well.
Okay, I'm going to give you a real quick synopsis, what not to do, and then what to do real quick before we run out of time. What not to do. Don't bring AI in and tell people, just experiment with it and we'll find out what works and what doesn't, and we'll learn from it, and just use it where you need to. That's the absolute worst thing you can do. AI is not improving a better email or creating a better email. That's not AI. Putting a better spreadsheet together for you, that's not AI. It'll increase your productivity, but you can't assign it rights just like that. So don't do that. What you need is an AI strategy put in place, and you got to make sure your business processes are in place, the data's in place, you can access it, and then you can work with it in that way. There's a lot of research, and I have a research paper that's coming out in a couple of weeks, and it's taking a look at the research on change adoption and why it failed. And we basically go in and say, well, it failed because people resisted change. But if you look at the research, I think there's a different way of interpreting that. And that's what this paper actually tries to explain. And it is, maybe we're assigning the wrong meaning to the research where it wasn't people resistance. You got to ask the question, why did people resist change? Well, maybe they didn't understand it. Maybe it wasn't communicated properly to them. So the people part takes on, oh, maybe it's leadership and middle management didn't communicate it properly so they could build a sense of trust. Without that trust, nobody's going to change. Without that trust, they mistrust you. The void gets filled one way or another. So maybe we interpreted the words wrong, and that whole ecosystem of business, technology, and people, we need to rebalance in some way. That's what brings it back to trust, and why trust is so important. And that means trust has to have clarity with it. So if I speak with clarity and I give an employee something they can own, and I teach them how to process the change for their own benefit, I don't know why they would resist that, other than they're a firefighter and they don't want to give up firefighting in a business. So they're always going to create havoc. And we all know we've had employees that are troublemakers. We know that. That's just the way it is. So it all comes back to trust. And I think that's on the shoulders of leadership and middle management, not frontline workers who are resisting the change. Maybe if we worked in their job for 2 weeks, we'd understand why they're resisting the change.
Makes so much sense. And I appreciate what you've been able to share today. I know for our own organization, there's a lot of learning that we are going through as as I've gotten to know you too over this last year. I want to encourage everybody to check out your book, The Intelligent Business Equation, available today on Kindle, on Amazon, and to really reach out to you on LinkedIn if they want to learn more about what you're talking about today, because I think there's just so much richness in this. And I'm excited for us to continue our conversation of the ground truth on LinkedIn Live next month. And so we'll invite everybody to join us again at that point. And again, Tid, thank you so much for sharing this exciting moment in your organization and for yourself.
Thank you, Kim. I think you are terrific in what you do as a business and a leader. Got my highest respect, and I enjoyed the conversation very much. I'm sure you could tell that.
I did as well. Thank you so much. For our listeners, we have resources relevant to our conversation today that you can access by visiting couragetoadvancepodcast.com. And remember to like and follow our podcast on your favorite platform so more leaders can benefit from these conversations. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Courage to Advance, where transformative leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about having the courage to find them.